Welcome to the deep dive. Take a second with me and just think about how much of what we see online, scrolling through social media, is actually real.
Right. That perfect life, the curated feed. Is it genuine?
Exactly. Is it someone's actual life, or is it more like a character they're playing? A public face that's totally different from who they are behind the screen?
It's a really fascinating question, isn't
It
it?
really is, because what happens when that character, the one that millions of people love, turns out to be hiding something? Well, something dark, something criminal.
And that's exactly where we're heading today. It's the unsettling core of this deep dive. We're looking into a case that absolutely rocks South Korea, but honestly, the ripples were felt all over the global social media scene.
We're talking about Sun Won-jung. Now, the name itself might not immediately click for everyone.
Probably not the given name.
Right, but you definitely knew his online name, the Mama Guy.
Ah, the mama guy, yeah.
It's almost hard to grasp just how huge he was without the numbers. At his absolute peak, Sun Won-jung had over 55 million followers.
55 million. Let that sink in for a moment.
Seriously, at that time, the only account bigger in Korea was BTS, the global K-pop megastars.
And he was an idol, right? No big entertainment company machine behind him.
No, not at all. The sources describe him as, just a normal guy, someone who somehow caught lightning in a bottle and became this global thing.
His big break really came during the 2020 COVID lockdowns, didn't it?
Exactly. That strange time when everyone was stuck at home, desperate for distraction. He started on TikTok, apparently just as a college extracurricular, for fun.
And then boom.
Total explosion. In just 1 year, he went from basically 0 to 30 million followers. It's staggering.
So what was the magic formula? What made him connect?
Well, the sources point to a few things. One, undeniable good looks. That always helps on visual platforms, right?
Sure. Gets people's attention initially.
But it was more than that. He had these funny video concepts that were apparently quite innovative. People just found them hilarious.
And the scream.
Ah, yes. The mama scream. So simple, almost childish, but it became his absolute signature, like a catchphrase on a hit TV show. It instantly branded him, the Mama Guy.
So our mission today really is to dive into the sources that detail this whole roller coaster. His incredible, almost unbelievable rise.
Yeah, meteoric is the word.
Then his sudden disappearance from the internet, which puzzled everyone. And then the really shocking, deeply disturbing stuff that came out later.
And this isn't just about one influencer falling from grace, is it? It feels bigger.
Oh, much bigger. It's about the nature of online identity itself, how fragile it can be, the hidden dangers that can lurk behind these really polished, celebrated online personas.
So as we go through this, we really want you, the listener, to think about it. What can we actually learn from this about online fame, about how people change, maybe behind the scenes?
And how do we even tell what's real anymore when the line between the character and the person gets so incredibly blurry?
Okay, let's get into it. The meteoric rise of the Mama Guy, a viral phenomenon.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. The birth of this social media empire. You mentioned COVID-19.
Yeah, you really can't separate his rise from that specific moment in time. 2020, global lockdowns.
Everyone's inside, scrolling, looking for connection, entertainment, anything to break the monotony, right?
Exactly. And platforms like TikTok just exploded. They were perfectly designed for that moment. Short, catchy, often funny videos. People had time, they had phones, and they were a captive audience.
And Sun Won-jul just surfed that wave perfectly.
Perfectly. But what's really striking is how low-key his start was. This wasn't some grand strategy, no marketing team.
Right, just a college kid messing around.
He started making TikToks as a college extracurricular, a hobby. And from that, well, the growth was just phenomenal. 30 million followers in a single year.
It's hard to even process that speed. At 26, he wasn't just popular, he was a global star.
Oh.
Almost overnight.
Not a slow climb. More like being launched into orbit. So what was it? What clicked so massively? We touched on the looks.
Yes, the good looks were definitely part of the initial draw, according to the sources. Social media is visual, after all.
But it takes more than looks to get that big.
Absolutely. It was his content, these innovative and funny video concepts. He apparently had a real talent for creating these little sketches, often playing characters, with this sort of quirky, almost innocent vibe.
And then the hook.
The mama scream. Simple, high-pitched, kind of goofy. But it became his trademark. Instantly recognizable.
Like a sound logo almost.
Exactly. It cemented his brand, the Mama Guy. It wasn't just random, it was smart branding. even if maybe accidental at first.
And that brand fueled an absolutely intense workload, right? This wasn't casual.
Not at all. The sources say he was uploading multiple videos
Yeah.
every single day,
Wow.
collaborating with celebrities, other influencers, constantly churning out content, aiming for those millions of views and likes on every post. It was a relentless grind.
That kind of schedule, it's intense.
It really tells you something about the current state of online fame, doesn't it? How algorithms and audience engagement can just create these massive stars out of seemingly nowhere.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what does it actually mean for a normal guy, like the sources call him, someone without that traditional entertainment industry backing, to get that kind of global reach? Just through pure virality.
It really changes the definition of celebrity, doesn't it?
It really does. It's this mix of algorithms, trends, personality, and just sheer volume of content. It's powerful, maybe even a bit volatile. But okay, before he was the mama guy, the global star, what about Sun Wanjong, the person? What were his roots?
Well, the sources give us some interesting background. He was born in Daegu, Korea. His family was described as well-off and loving.
Okay.
He seemed pretty private about the specifics, which isn't unusual, but his parents were described as typical Asian parents.
Which, in that context, usually implies...
A strong focus on academics, right? Achievement, trophies, getting top grades.
Yeah.
It suggests a very structured, disciplined environment growing up. High expectations.
Definitely sounds like it. But his childhood interests weren't purely academic, were they?
No, and that's quite interesting. In elementary school, apparently he was really into math and science. So quite analytical.
Okay.
But then in middle school, he took up professional boxing training.
Wow, that's a shift. From science labs to boxing gloves.
It is, isn't it? It suggests a kind of versatility, maybe a restless energy, a drive to excel, whether it was mental or physical. He wasn't easily pigeonholed.
That makes sense. So this diverse background, the disciplined upbringing, how did that lead to his next step?
Well, as he got closer to college age, his interests shifted again. He got really passionate about music production, mixing, mastering, that whole world. He even started a sound engineering major.
Ah, so a creative path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that clashed pretty hard with what his parents wanted for him.
Let me guess. Something more stable.
Precisely. They preferred the traditional route, doctor, maybe a good corporate job. Not the uncertain world of music. It's a classic conflict, really. Personal passion versus parental expectations for security.
So how did he handle that? Did he just rebel?
Actually, no. He was quite strategic about it. Even then, he made a deal with them.
A deal.
Yeah. He basically said, look, if I graduate college with really excellent marks, will you let me pursue sound engineering?
Clever. Put the ball in their court based on his performance.
And he did it. He worked hard, got top grades, his parents were proud, and they stuck to their end of the bargain. They gave him permission to study sound engineering at a really good school, the Dong-Ah Institute of Media and Arts in Seoul.
So that was his ticket. He earned his freedom, in a way.
He absolutely did. It was a huge turning point. After years of following their guidance, he finally got the green light to chase his own dream.
That whole negotiation, though, it says a lot.
It really does. It shows how much those early influences, the parental expectations, shaped him. But it also highlights that internal struggle between what you want and what's expected of you.
And maybe it hints at what happens when someone who's been under tight control suddenly gets that freedom.
Exactly. That sudden release, especially combined with success, it can be incredibly powerful. For better, or sometimes, as we'll see, for worse. It can either lead to focused self-direction or, well, getting lost. 2, the unraveling. Freedom, fame, and a shifting reality.
That's a really key point because once he had that freedom, once he was in Seoul chasing his passion, things started to change pretty dramatically.
Even before the mega fame, mind you. Before the mama guy was a global phenomenon, the sources say Sun was always popular.
Yeah, described as popular among people around him since childhood. Cheerful and friendly. Seems like he was naturally good with people.
Definitely. He made friends easily in college, he even lived with a group of them, so he wasn't some loner, he was socially adept.
But then came TikTok. And the money.
Ah, yes, the financial independence. That was the game changer. Suddenly, millions of views meant real income. Significant income.
So he didn't need his parents' money anymore.
Not just their money. He didn't need their permission anymore. For anything. Big life decisions, small purchases, complete autonomy.
For someone from that kind of background, that must have been incredibly intoxicating.
Absolutely. Total freedom combined with sudden, massive fame and pressure. The sources mention he had this real craving for freedom.
Understandable, maybe.
He described himself as being on cloud nine, just totally swept up in it. And he started making major life choices without even consulting his parents. The world was suddenly his oyster, no strings attached.
But that oyster came with a price, right? The demands of being that famous.
Oh, immense. The schedule was relentless. Constant interviews, brand deals, collaborations, and always needing to create more content. That daily grind.
It sounds exhausting.
The sources say he felt burned out and exhausted many times, which is completely believable. Burnout is incredibly real, especially in those high-pressure, always-on creative fields, that constant demand for novelty and engagement.
So how did he cope when he was burned out or had downtime?
Well, according to the sources, his release was to always go with his friends either to clubs or pubs or to have some drinks.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just, letting off steam occasionally. It was a significant shift from his past. He even said himself he'd never have gone to such places if he'd stuck to his parents' wishes.
So a deliberate move into a lifestyle they disapproved of. Tasting the forbidden fruit, maybe?
Perhaps. It's that potent mix, isn't it? Sudden, absolute freedom coupled with intense public pressure. How did that change him? Moving away from any kind of parental check-in, any external accountability.
Yeah, it makes you think about the pitfalls of sudden fame, the temptations. Going from needing permission just to go to Seoul to having millions of fans, money, total freedom. Where are the boundaries then? Who sets them?
It's a serious question. And it touches on something universal, doesn't it? Burnout makes people seek escape. But if there's no accountability, no guidance, those escapes can become destructive.
Especially with the resources and access that fame provides.
Exactly. It's a dangerous combination, amplified by the spotlight.
Which brings us to the darker side of his transformation. The contrast between the public image and the private reality. It became huge.
Jarringly so. The mama guy persona was all about being this cute boy, innocent, funny, shouting, "Mama," endearing, right?
Totally. That was a brand.
But the sources are blunt. In real life, Sun became not like that at all.
How so?
His lifestyle became, quote, very unhealthy. It wasn't just occasional clubbing. It was frequent pubs, constant partying, and according to the sources, drug use with his friends.
Drugs, too. Wow.
Yeah, a complete 180 from the disciplined student who needed permission to travel. The sources mention a life increasingly filled with drugs, parties, and girls. It points to a really significant, troubling shift inside him.
And was he doing this alone, or?
The company he kept was crucial. The sources explicitly state that being surrounded by influencers played a very big role in this change.
How did they put it? Something about...
These people do shape you in a way that you can either become good or you can become bad. It's a powerful observation.
So his new friends, these other influencers, they weren't exactly a positive influence.
Apparently not. The sources suggest they wouldn't point out his mistakes or question his behavior. It sounds like they were more interested in riding his coattails.
Like enjoying the reflected glory and maybe his money.
That's the implication. Just wanted to enjoy his money and gain attention from his attention. Yeah. So no reality checks, no one saying, "Hey man, maybe slow down." Just an echo chamber of indulgence.
That lack of correction,
yeah,
that constant reinforcement.
It was, as the source says, leading him towards something that was going to destroy his reputation.
It's fascinating in a grim way. The impact of your environment, your peer group, especially when you add unchecked power and wealth into the mix.
You see the potential for narcissism, hedonism?
Yeah.
When there's just no accountability left.
Exactly. When every impulse can be satisfied and no one pushes back. It's a cautionary tale about freedom without any kind of moral anchor. 3, the crime. A shocking betrayal of trust.
And that downward spiral, that unraveling, it led somewhere truly horrific. July 2023. Yeah, this is where the story takes its darkest turn. The sources describe a scene. Sun and his friends at some kind of social gathering. A club, maybe a bar. Drinking heavily, finishing glass after glass.
Sounds like a party night, but with a sinister edge building?
Apparently so, because during this time, Sun and one of his friends noticed an extremely beautiful girl there.
Did they know her?
Based on what came out later, it seems unlikely. The assumption we're working with is that she was a stranger to them.
Okay, so Sun approaches her.
Yeah, using his fame, his looks, he struck up a very good conversation. Seems charming on the surface, right? A celebrity interaction?
But their intentions weren't charming at all.
Not according to the sources. They state very clearly their intentions were not noble. They were constantly trying to get into her pants, trying to initiate a sexual encounter she wasn't looking for.
And how did she react?
She saw right through it, showed no interest, made it clear she was just there to party with her own friends, recognized him but wasn't interested in anything more. She refused their advances.
Okay, so they backed off.
No, that's the chilling part. Her refusal didn't deter them. The source mentions ego or stubbornness. They were not at all happy about being rejected.
So instead of respecting her, no.
They very cleverly planned something else. They decided to keep her talking, keep giving her drinks, deliberately,
Right.
until she was borderline unconscious.
Wait, they planned to get her drunk to the point of passing out.
That's what the sources allege.
Yeah.
It wasn't accidental overdrinking. It was a calculated plan to incapacitate her through alcohol, manipulation, coercion.
That's horrifying.
And they apparently did exactly that. They kept pushing drinks on her until she lost consciousness, completely vulnerable.
And then...
Then the two of them, Sun and his friend, brought this girl to Sun's friend's house, and they kept that girl with them all night.
Oh, God. The implication is...
It's incredibly strong. The source says, I'm pretty sure I don't need to tell you guys what they both did to this girl. It points directly to sexual assault.
While she was unconscious.
Exactly. The source emphasizes they didn't think about her as a person, someone's sister, someone's daughter. The key point is undeniable. This girl was not conscious all night. She did not consent to what these guys were doing to her.
This goes so far beyond just a fall from grace. This is a profound violation, a betrayal of basic human decency.
It truly is. The source really wants the listener to try and imagine the horror of that situation.
Waking up somewhere unfamiliar, hearing laughing, camera clicks.
Exactly. And then that slow, sickening realization of what happened while you were unconscious. The trauma is unimaginable, a complete shattering of safety.
That moment of waking up, that must have been pure terror, but it's also where she found the strength to act.
Incredible strength.
Yeah.
She wakes up, hears them laughing, hears those camera clicks. She realizes what's happened.
What did she do?
She didn't hesitate. She ran. Ran straight from Sun and his friend's house to the Gangnam police station in Seoul.
Wow. Immediately sought help, even after everything.
Yeah. Her memory was hazy from the alcohol, but she told the police everything she could remember. It takes unbelievable courage to do that, right after experiencing such trauma.
And how did the police respond?
Very seriously.
Mm.
The sources highlight that such cases are taken very seriously in Korea. An immediate investigation was launched.
And they protected her identity.
Yes, they handled the sensitive case very carefully, making sure her identity was kept confidential. Protecting the victim is paramount in these situations, especially before concrete evidence is established.
So they went after Sun.
He was the prime suspect, named by her. Police went to his house. He refused to open the door.
He barricaded himself in.
Seems like it. They had no other choice but to use force. They even called the fire department to get inside. Once they breached the door, he was arrested immediately.
Did he confess or deny it?
He claimed whatever he did was consensual. But the sources say it was no use now because it was too late. The victim's testimony, the circumstances, the evidence was mounting against him.
Arresting Korea's biggest influencer. That must have been huge news.
Instant headline. Massive media frenzy. Some outlets tried to blur his face initially, but it was pointless.
Everyone knew who the mama guy was.
Exactly. Due to the popularity of Sun, the media could not hide his identity. The recognition was instant.
And the public reaction.
Utter disgust, anger. The realization that this sweet and innocent online character was allegedly a predator and criminal in reality. The illusion just completely shattered.
So where does the legal case stand now?
It went to court. The first hearing was back in January 2024, and the sources say it's still ongoing.
What kind of sentence is he facing if convicted?
Potentially 7 years in jail. The laws for such crimes in South Korea are described as very strict. Escape seems almost impossible.
And his career, even if he somehow avoided jail time.
Over. Finished. The source says his comeback is absolutely zero. The image damage is just too immense, too irreparable.
It's hard to imagine anyone coming back from something like this.
Although, interestingly, the source does mention, and finds it quite surprising, that some fans who are still supporting him, and they believe that he is innocent.
Really? Even now?
Yeah. The source draws a parallel to another case, the Isabel Guzman case, suggesting some people might sympathize based on looks, despite the alleged crime. It's a disturbing footnote, that denial.
Yeah, unsettling.
But zooming out, This case really highlights the importance of a justice system that protects victims while still holding powerful people accountable. Fame shouldn't be a shield.
No, absolutely not. And it shows the challenge of sorting out truth when celebrity and public image are involved, perception versus legal fact.
Right. It's a stark reminder that the law applies to everyone, no matter how many followers they have. Justice has to operate beyond the online persona for deeper reflections. The internet persona versus reality.
Okay, so stepping back from the specific events, after tracing this whole arc from massive fame to alleged crime, what are the bigger lessons here? What should we be thinking about?
Well, the most fundamental point the sources make, and it's one we probably all need to remember, is that it's not necessary for a person to be exactly as they appear on the internet. It can be an illusion, a performance.
Definitely requires more media literacy from all of us now.
And that brings us to another core theme, the corrupting influence of fame and money. The sources are pretty direct about this.
Yeah, saying fame and money are things that corrupt a person's mind. And that seeing someone's personality change dramatically, like from A type to B type, that should be a warning sign.
A red flag.
Yeah.
Indicating maybe a loss of grounding, an unchecked ego taking over. It speaks to a vulnerability we might all have when faced with that level of power and adoration without checks and balances.
So what's the antidote, according to the sources?
Timeless wisdom, really. Discipline, guidance. Specifically, there should be some discipline in your life. There should be some type of guidance from your parents in your life.
Having that anchor, those external voices of reason, those established values.
Exactly, even when you think you're beyond needing it.
And they stress this applies to everyone, right? Not just influencers.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter if you become a very big superstar, a politician, president, anything. The need for that moral compass, for discipline, for guidance from people who genuinely care, that's universal, foundational.
It really boils down to that almost cliche, but maybe deeply true advice. You should always listen to your parents, even if you don't take all of it.
Right, not blind obedience, but valuing that guidance, that grounding force, especially when you're flying high.
So it makes you ask, in our society now, which is so driven by likes, followers, instant success, what can people do to protect their own integrity? Yeah. How do you resist that corruption when fame hits?
It's a huge question. How do you combat unchecked ego when the world is telling you you're amazing? It requires immense self-awareness, a strong moral foundation, things that seem increasingly hard to cultivate in the current climate.
So just to recap where we've been, we saw the incredible rise of Sun Wanjong, the mama guy, from college kid to global star, rivaling BTS in follower count.
Yeah.
Almost unbelievable.
And the shift, the freedom, the wealth, the influence of his friends, leading him down a path described as unhealthy, destructive.
And then the alleged crime, that horrifying night in July 2023. The accusations of sexual assault that shattered his image and led to his arrest, with a serious legal battle still ongoing in South Korea.
This whole story, this deep dive, it really forces us to confront some hard truths. First, the stark gap that can exist between the online persona and the real person. Social media can be deeply deceptive.
A character, not reality.
Second, the incredibly powerful and potentially corrupting force of sudden fame and wealth, especially when it's not balanced by discipline, guidance, or accountability.
It may be the biggest takeaway for everyone listening.
The absolute need for critical thinking. We have to look beyond the follower counts, the curated images. We, the audience, have to be more discerning.
Yeah. And it makes you think about our own role, doesn't it? What responsibility do you, listening right now, have in how you consume online content, how you evaluate these personalities?
How can we together build a culture that actually values authenticity, accountability, ethical behavior, not just in ourselves, but in the people we choose to follow and admire online, going beyond just the likes and the views?
Definitely something to think about, something to mull over long after this deep dive ends.